Dream report, day 1400 and something. We are still alive, which surprises no one more than us. Captain Lewin Vance held the recorder under her chin and stared out at the dark. The Magpie's forward viewport was scarred with the slow erosion of 4 years of microdust, and the stars beyond it had taken on the texture of old glass. She tapped the recorder against her teeth and tried again. The starboard coupling is making a noise I would describe as a small, polite cough. Ojo says it is fine. Ojo also said the galley fridge was fine before it started incubating an unknown life form. I am not reassured. She paused. Somewhere behind her in the long throat of the ship, something clanked. She waited for the clank to introduce itself further. It did not. Mood among the crew is what I will call professionally tired. Riggs has stopped shaving. Marisol has started doing yoga in the cargo hold, which I think is a cry for help. Tev still claims to enjoy the coffee. Tev is a liar. She thumbed the recorder off and let her head fall back against the seat. Above her, the cabin lights had been on the same dim orange setting for so long that she could no longer remember what white looked like. Somewhere out there, 4 years and 11 months ago, she had left a port that smelled like rain on hot pavement. She had not smelled rain since. The Magpie's atmosphere recyclers gave the air a faint, persistent tang of copper and old onions, and she had stopped noticing it around month 3. We are inbound for Sol, ETA 11 days. I am going to take the longest bath any human has ever taken. There will be songs about it. The recorder clicked off. Lewin set it on the console with the careful, ritual gentleness of a woman who had stopped trusting her own hands. She rubbed her eyes until red shapes moved behind them. Behind her, Marisol cleared her throat from the comms bench. Cap got something. Tell me it's a clean docking lane and a hot shower. Tell you what it actually is. Lewin turned her chair. Hit me. Marisol's screens were a slow waterfall of numbers. Her thin brown fingers hovered over them like she expected them to bite. Signal, long band, outside our heading. It's Cap, it's beautiful. Beautiful is not a unit of measure, Sol. It's a Marisol scrubbed her face. It's math singing. I don't know how else to say it. It's organized, it's not noise. Lewin levered herself up from her chair. Her knees popped. Somewhere in her chest, a tired animal stirred and lay back down. Show me. The signal scrolled down Marisol's center screen in a slow, looping cascade. Lewin had been a comms officer before she had been a captain. She knew the shape of noise. She knew the shape of a hailing protocol. She knew the shape of pulsars and the shape of every signature in the RIM catalog the Magpie had been sent to chart. This was none of those things. It was almost a chord. It was almost a sentence. It was almost the way her grandmother used to call her in from the yard at dusk, 3 notes, rising, then a held breath. She felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. They had been there for 4 years, those hairs, and she had not asked anything of them. They had things to say now. Log it, she said. Tag it anomaly code amber, don't reply. Cap, we should. Don't reply, Sol. Marisol's hand stilled. She looked up. Lewin did not often use the voice. Lewin used the voice now. Yes, Cap. The signal looped twice more, slow and clean, and then thinned out into the long dark. Lewin stayed on the bridge another hour. She drank coffee that tasted of foil and resignation. She watched the place on Marisol's screen where the signal had been. She had the strange, embarrassing thought that she would like very much to be home. She did not say it. She wrote the dream report. Dream report, day 1400 and something, addendum. We heard a song from very far away. I do not know who was singing. I am going to sleep now. If you find this and we have not arrived, please tell my brother I tried. She thumbed the recorder off and went to her bunk and did not sleep. She lay in the dark of her cabin and listened to the Magpie talk to herself. The Magpie had a vocabulary. There was the slow gurgle of the coolant in the bulkhead behind her head, which Lewin privately translated as "I am tired, but I am here." There was the periodic tap of the heat exchanger cycling, which was nothing at all but which she had decided meant the ship was thinking. There was, somewhere very deep in the keel, a long low note from the drive bearings, a note that had been there for 1400 days, the ship's own held breath. She thought about the signal. She thought about her mother. She thought about 3 notes rising and a held breath, and she could not in the dark decide whether the resemblance between her mother's tune and the alien chord was a thing she had heard or a thing her tired brain had constructed. She thought it did not really matter. She thought she would log it in the morning. She thought she would not, in fact, log it. Somewhere past midnight by ship's clock she got up. She walked the Magpie's spine the way she had walked it 1,000 times in her sock feet, one hand on the bulkhead. Tev was at the helm. He nodded at her without looking around. In the galley, Halberd was sitting at the small steel table with a cup of something that was not coffee but pretended to be. He looked up. "Cap, Halberd, you should sleep." "I should." "You're not going to." "I'm not." He nudged a second cup across the table. She sat. The galley smelled the way the galley always smelled, copper, old onions, a faint sweetness from whatever was rotting that nobody had yet found. The table was a little sticky in one corner where Marisol had spilled syrup 8 months ago and never quite gotten it. Lewin put her finger on the sticky spot, almost fondly. "Halberd," she said, "if we get home." "When we get home, what's the first thing you eat?" He thought about it. Halberd thought about everything. He had a small, careful face, and he thought about everything, and he was, in Lewin's private estimation, the steadiest human she had ever served with. "Tomato," he said, "sliced. With salt, that's it. That's the whole thing, a tomato on a plate." "Just a tomato." "Just a tomato, Cap. You have been eating freeze-dried for 4 years, and you ask me what I want first. I want a thing that grew." She nodded. She drank the not coffee. It was terrible. It was hers. "Marisol wants pho," she said. "Riggs wants a beer that he can taste. Ojo says he will eat anything that did not come out of a bag. Tev refuses to commit to an answer. I think Tev does not know what food is anymore. I think Tev has become an idea of a person. Tev is fine. Tev hums. Tev has always hummed. Tev hums in his sleep, Halberd. He hums in his sleep. I have heard him. The hum has gotten more complicated. The hum has movements now. The hum is a symphony." Halberd's mouth twitched. He drank his not coffee. "What about you, Cap?" She thought about it. She thought about it for a long time. She thought about her mother's kitchen, and the smell of the rain, and the dog that had died when she was 9, and the way her father used to butter toast, not spreading the butter, but laying it down in cold yellow strips and letting the heat of the toast do the rest. She thought about the bar on Anchor Yard where the bar staff knew which drinks would not poison you. She thought about a particular bench in a particular park outside the academy where, at 19, she had failed a calculus exam and decided to enlist and discovered, sitting on that bench with the failed exam in her lap, that the world was bigger than her failures, and that the bigness was a kind of mercy. "I want," she said, "to sit on a bench and watch nothing happen." Halberd nodded slowly. "That'll keep," he said. "Yeah," she said, "I think it will." 11 days became 9, became 4, became 1. The Magpie limped, and the dark thinned, and the heliopause showed up on their instruments like the lit window of a house at the end of a long road. Lewin sat in her chair and let Tev fly. Tev hummed something low and tuneless that Lewin had stopped asking about. The crew began to wash. Riggs shaved. Halberd, who had been making increasingly creative threats against the galley fridge, opened it, removed the life form, and laid it gently in the airlock as if it were a small soldier being buried at sea. The Magpie's atmosphere took on the faint cleanness of people who had decided they would be seen. Lewin had a photograph of her mother taped to the edge of the navigation console. She had not looked at it in 2 months. She looked at it now. Her mother had been a small woman with a long, patient face and a habit of humming while she worked. 3 notes, rising, then a held breath. Lewin put a finger on the photograph and pressed, as if she could push it through the metal and out the other side into a kitchen with rain on the window. "Sol pickets at 22 minutes, Tev said, hailing now. Marisol's hands moved on her bench. Lewin watched the back of her head. Marisol's shoulders were doing a thing they did not normally do. "What?" "Cap, the pickets aren't responding on the old protocols." "Try the backup." "I have tried the backup." "Try emergency." "Cap," Marisol turned. "The pickets aren't pickets. There are too many of them. There are way too many of them." Lewin leaned forward. The forward viewport showed a slow wash of stars and the soft thumb smudge of the inner system. She brought up the tactical overlay. The overlay populated and populated and populated. For a long moment, she thought it was a glitch. The Magpie had been 4 years on the rim, and her sensor suite was older than most of the crew. She had seen the tactical overlay misfire before. She had seen it draw friendly contacts as a single solid bar across the screen, because some idiot at Refit had keyed the resolution wrong. This was not that. This was hundreds of contacts. This was a wall. "Tev," she said very calmly, "cut burn." "Cutting burn." "Sol, broadcast on the open channel. Civilian and military. Tell them who we are. Tell them we are unarmed. Tell them we are coming in for repairs. Tell them we have been on the rim for 4 years and we are very, very tired and we would like to come home." "Yes, Cap." Marisol's voice went out into the dark. The Magpie drifted, her ancient drive thrumming down. Lewin watched the wall on her tactical and counted ship classes she did not recognize. Cruisers with hull profiles she had never seen. Carriers the size of small moons. Picket destroyers in flights of 12 where they used to fly in 2s. A foundry the size of Luna sitting where Luna used to be, except no. There was still Luna. There was the foundry beside it. There were 2 of them now. 2 of them. A reply came in. It was a voice. It was a human voice. It said very gently, "Magpie, this is Anchor Yard. Welcome home. We've been waiting for you. Stand by for tow. Stand down all weapons systems. Coffee is on." Lewin sat with her hands on the arms of her chair and stared at the wall of ships, and she discovered that she was crying, very quietly, the way her mother used to cry while doing the dishes, without commitment, without performance, the slow leak of a body that had been holding too much for too long. Tev did not say anything. Tev hummed his tuneless tune. Marisol, behind her, put a hand briefly on her shoulder and took it away again. The Magpie went home. Anchor Yard was a city. It had not been a city when Lewin had left. It had been a station, a fat ring around a fat habitat, with a docking spine and a bar where the bar staff knew which drinks would not poison you. The bar was still there. Lewin could see it through the viewport as the tow brought them in. So was the ring. So was the habitat. Around them, attached to them, growing out of them like coral on a sunk hull, was the rest. Foundries, slipways, magazine hardpoints. A new arm of the station extending out into the dark, and on that arm, in dry dock berths, the ships, the wall of ships. Up close they were even larger than they had looked on the tactical. The hulls were dark and matte and unornamented, and they had a quality Lewin recognized from her grandfather's hands. The quality of things made by people who intended them to work. A small craft came out to meet them. Standard inspection skiff, except the markings were new. A red circle with a black line through it. Lewin did not know what the symbol meant. She suspected it meant something simple, and that the simplicity was the point. The skiff led them to a berth. The berth closed around the Magpie like a hand closing around a bird, and through the umbilical came pressure and air and, faintly, the smell of. "Is that coffee?" Riggs said, in a voice Lewin had not heard from him in 3 years. That's real coffee. That's bean coffee. Cap Halberd was at the airlock. He had his medkit slung. Permission to disembark. Granted, Lewin stood. Her knees popped. The tired animal in her chest stirred again and this time cautiously stayed up. All hands, disembark order. Tev, bring the recorder. Yes, Cap. The umbilical was warm. The Magpie had been cold for 4 years. Not freezing, not dangerous, but the soft, mean cold of a ship that was being economical with its heat. The umbilical was the temperature of an afternoon. Lewin walked through it with her crew behind her and stepped out into a receiving bay that was full of people. Not crowded, full, organized, quiet. There were perhaps 30 of them in 3 loose ranks in a working uniform she did not recognize, dark gray, with the red circle and line on the shoulder. They were not at attention. They were standing the way people stand when they have been told that some friends are coming home and they would like the friends to feel welcomed. At the front stood a woman who was, by Lewin's measure, about 60, with close-cropped silver hair and a face that had been weathered by things Lewin did not yet know about. The woman's uniform had more lines on the shoulder than Lewin had ever seen on a uniform. She held 2 cups of coffee. She held them the way a person holds 2 cups of coffee, not with ceremony, just with care. Captain Vance. Her voice was low and easy. Admiral Thara Okonkwo, welcome home, you look like hell. Admiral, Lewin saluted. Her hand was not entirely steady. Yes, ma'am, we've been busy. I bet. Okonkwo extended one of the cups. Drink this. It will not fix anything, but it will be the first thing today that isn't broken. Lewin took the cup. It was hot. It smelled like a kitchen with rain on the window. She held it in both hands and did not drink it yet, because she did not trust her throat. Admiral, she said, with respect, what the hell happened to my system? Okonkwo looked at her over the rim of her own cup. Her eyes were very tired and very kind. Walk with me, she said. We'll get to it. Your crew is going to be taken care of. There are hot showers. There are beds with sheets. There is real food. Halberd, yes, I know all your names, son. Don't look so surprised, Halberd. The medical team will want to see you because we have some new gear that's going to make your job easier. Marisol, comms will want to debrief you because we think you may have heard something we have heard. Riggs, Zeno wants you because we think you saw something we have seen. Ojo, the yard chief wants to weep on your shoulder about your starboard coupling. Tev, you can take your captain's recorder and you can come with me, because the Admiral wants to hear the dream report. Tev's eyes were enormous. Ma'am. I've been listening to them, Okonkwo said. We caught the last 6 months on the long band. They have been keeping us company. Come on, walk. Lewin walked. The coffee burned her tongue in a way she had not been burned in 4 years. She did not mind. The corridor beyond the receiving bay was lined with people who were not staring but who were aware. A young man with a clipboard, 2 engineers with hands black with grease. A child, in an anchor yard corridor, holding the hand of a woman in the gray uniform, looking up at Lewin with the calm, untroubled curiosity of a person who had grown up knowing the dark. Admiral, Lewin said, the fleet. Yes. You've built a fleet. Yes. Why? Okonkwo took a slow sip of her coffee and let the silence go a little while before she answered. 3 months after you went out, she said, we got a signal from a long way away. We did not understand it at first. It took us 6 months to understand it. When we understood it, we did not like what we understood. A signal, Lewin said. Mathematical, organized. It came in on every band at once. Like a chord, it said, she paused. It said a number of things. The simplest of them was, you are noticed. Lewin stopped walking. Her coffee tilted, almost spilled. We heard it, she said. On our way in, 11 days out. Marisol logged it. It was beautiful. Okonkwo's face did a thing that Lewin would later recognize as relief settling into a face that had not relaxed in years. Yes, the Admiral said. That is what they do first, before the rest. The rest. Walk Vance, drink your coffee. The briefing room had a long table and no windows. Lewin sat at the table with Tev beside her, fiddling with the recorder. Okonkwo sat opposite. On the wall behind the Admiral, a slow display turned through a series of images. Lewin tried to look at them and felt her eyes slide off. They were not images that the eye wanted to settle on. They call themselves, Okonkwo said, in the closest approximation we have, the coil. They are not by their own understanding a species. They are an arrangement. They communicate by consensus harmonics. What you and your comms officer heard was a fragment of their listening protocol. When they sing, every voice in the choir sings the same note, and the note is the decision. They have been doing this for a very long time. They do not have what you would call disagreement. They have not had what you would call disagreement in possibly 1,000,000 years. Lewin's coffee was cooling in her hands. She did not drink. The signal we heard, Okonkwo said, was a notice. It is the first thing they send to a candidate civilization. It says in the closest translation we have heard you and we are coming, and when we arrive you will join the chord, and the chord will be one note larger and more beautiful. They mean it. They are not unkind, Vance. That is the worst of it. They are not unkind. They believe they are bringing music to a noisy room. And we said no. We did not say anything. We listened. We worked out what they were. We worked out what the signal meant. We worked out how long we had. And then Okonkwo set down her cup. Then we built. How long? Until the choir arrives at Saul. By our best math, about a week. Lewin sat very still. A week, she said. A week. You knew this when you brought me in. I knew this when we heard you coming. We tracked the magpie for the last 8 months. We knew exactly when you would be here. Okonkwo's eyes were on her. We did not want you to come home to a dock and a quiet leave and find out at the wrong moment. We wanted to bring you in. We wanted you to drink coffee with us. We wanted you to know what your house looks like now, before you have to fight for it. My brother, Lewin said, Jonas. Captain Jonas Vance commands the Stubborn out of Berth 19. He has been told you are home. He is currently shouting at a mechanic about a coolant line and pretending he did not just cry. He will be along. Lewin put her hands flat on the table. They were not steady. She did not bother trying to steady them. Admiral, she said, I came home for repairs. I came home for leave. I came home. She stopped, started again. What do you want from me? I want, Okonkwo said, you to drink your coffee. I want you to take a shower so hot it scalds. I want you to sleep in a bed with sheets. I want you to see your brother. I want you to eat something that was a living thing within the last month. And then I want to refit your ship, because the Magpie is the only craft in this fleet that has, however briefly, been close to the choir's listening protocol and survived to log it. I want her sensor logs. I want her hull. I want her. And I want her captain, because the choir will be here in a week, and we are going to need every captain who knows what their voice sounds like in the dark. Lewin looked at the Admiral for a long time. She picked up her coffee. She drank. It tasted like a kitchen with rain on the window. Yes, ma'am, she said. Dream report, day 1490-something. I have slept in a bed. There were sheets. I do not know who I am anymore. Lewin was sitting on the edge of the bed in the visiting officer's quarters. Her hair was still damp from the shower. She had been in the shower for 41 minutes. She had counted. She had also cried for some unspecified portion of those 41 minutes, and she did not feel any need to be embarrassed about it. The bed had sheets. The sheets were white. There was a small lamp on a small table. There was a window, real glass, and through the window the slow turning of Anchor Yard's foundry arm with the slipway lights moving in a long bright thread. There was a knock at the door. She did not answer for a moment. Then she said, "It's open." The door opened. Her brother stood in it. Jonas Vance was taller than her, broader than her, 4 years older than her, and had the same long, patient face their mother had had. He was in the gray uniform. He had the red circle and line on his shoulder. He had more lines on his face than he had had when she left. He had a bandage on one knuckle from punching something he was not going to mention. He stood in the doorway and looked at her, and did the thing their father had done, the slow, considered nod, as if confirming that yes, this was in fact his sister, and she was in fact alive, and the universe could be trusted on at least this one point. "Hi, Lewin." "Hi, Jonas." He came in. He sat on the bed beside her. He did not hug her because Vance's did not hug at first. Vance's sat near. He smelled like the gray uniform smelled, clean cotton and engine oil and something faintly antiseptic. "You look like hell," he said. The Admiral mentioned. "She's not wrong. Are you eating?" "I just ate 4 things. Halbert is making me eat 4 things every 2 hours. He says I have a body mass deficit." "You always had a body mass deficit. You were the smallest thing in any room you ever entered. Mom used to feed you butter on a spoon." "She did not." "She did, Lewin. I remember it. I was furious about it because I never got butter on a spoon." "Because you were fat, Jonas." I was solid. I was a solid child." She laughed. It startled her. She had not laughed in she did not know how long. The laugh came out broken, and a little wet, and Jonas put his arm around her shoulders the way he had done when she was 9, and the dog had died, and she leaned her wet head against his uniform, and the Vances hugged. After a while she said, "Mom." 3 years ago." "Oh." It was quick. She was in the kitchen. She was humming. The neighbor said she heard her stop and went over. It was very fast, Lewin. She would not have known. "Oh." "She left you a letter. I have it. I will give it to you when you can, when you have a little more." "Yeah." They sat. Out the window the foundry arm turned. "Jonas," she said. "Yeah." "They want to refit the Magpie." "I know." "They want to send me out again." "I know." "In a week." "I know, Lewin." She breathed. "Are we going to win this?" she said. Jonas was quiet a long time. He was looking out the window. He was watching the foundry arm. "I don't know," he said. I think we have a chance. I think we built a chance. I think the Admiral built a chance. I think a lot of very tired people built a chance, and we are going to find out in about a week whether the chance was the right shape." "That's not a yes." "No," he said, "it's not." He squeezed her shoulder. "But Lewin," he said, "we are not the people they think we are. They think we are a candidate civilization. They think we are a noisy room they are going to bring music to. They do not know what we are. They have not met us. They have only heard us from very far away." "What are we?" He thought about it. He thought about it for a long time. Out the window, a slipway lit up. A new ship coming online. Drive cores warming, blue-white light flaring across the bay, and washing the inside of their small, bright room. "We are the people," he said finally, "who buried Mom in the kitchen and built 2 foundries and made coffee for our sister, and we did not stop. That's what we are. We did not stop." The refit took 5 days. Lewin watched it from a gantry overhead. The Magpie, stripped, looked smaller than she had ever imagined, a long bone of a ship, her hull plating peeled back, her ribs exposed. Around her swarmed the yard crew. They moved with the slow, deliberate competence of people who had done this many times before. They cut. They welded. They threaded new cable through her old veins. They pulled the old drive. Lewin had cursed that drive on every one of 1,400 days. And they slid in a new core, a thing of dark matte metal with the red circle and line stenciled in white on its housing. They put guns on her, not many. The Magpie was not built to carry guns. She was built to carry sensors. They put 2 forward batteries and a single dorsal lance, and they did not pretend it was more than it was. They added armor where they could. They added a new comm suite that, when Marisol saw it, made her sit down on the floor and put her face in her hands for 10 minutes. They left the photograph. Lewin had asked and they had left it. The photograph of her mother taped to the corner of the navigation console. The yard chief had personally walked it across the bay in a small clear envelope and taped it back where it had been. He had nodded at Lewin and gone back to work without speaking. She had nodded after him. On the fourth day, Okonkwo found her on the gantry. "Vance." "Admiral." The admiral leaned on the rail beside her. They watched the work. After a while, Okonkwo said, "I have a thing to ask you." "Yes, ma'am." "Your sensor logs from the rim, the signal you caught your comms officer caught 11 days out. Marisol pulled it apart for us. It's good data, cleanest sample we have, but there's something else in the logs from earlier." Lewin turned her head. "From earlier?" 8 months ago, you crossed a piece of debris. You logged it as a probable coil scout, except you didn't know that's what it was. You called it large object anomalous geometry. No transponder did not engage. You went around it. You went a long way around it. I remember it looked wrong. I didn't like the shape of it. You were right not to like the shape of it. It was a coil reconnaissance node. Dead, long dead, but it was theirs. And Vance, the geometry of that node, the seam pattern on its hull, matches the geometry of their listening vessel. The choir, the big one, the one coming here. Lewin looked at her. "You logged the seams," Okonkwo said, "in detail because you were thorough, because that is the kind of captain you are. Vance, we know where the joints are on their listening ship. We know where the maintenance seams are. We know where the gaps are between the panels of the cord." Lewin took a slow breath. And in 3 days, the admiral said, I am going to ask you to fly the Magpie into one of those gaps. Lewin was quiet a long moment. She watched the yard crew thread a new sensor cable into the Magpie's spine. "Admiral," she said, "may I ask a question?" "Always." "You knew about that scout log. You knew when you brought me in." "Yes." "You knew before you brought me in." "Yes." "Was the coffee a bribe?" Okonkwo's mouth moved. It was almost a smile. It was the closest a face that tired could get to one. "The coffee," she said, "was because you have been gone 4 years. The mission is because you are the captain who logged the seam. They are separate things, Vance. Don't insult my coffee." Lewin breathed out. She watched her ship. She watched the new lance settle into its dorsal mount. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Okay." The refit in the days that followed was its own kind of strangeness. Lewin had spent 4 years and 11 months in command of the Magpie, and she had developed, the way a long-married woman develops, a sense of her partner's noises. She knew the cough of the starboard coupling and the grumble of the air recycler and the small electric tick the navigation console made when it was thinking about something. The Magpie that began to emerge from the dry dock made noises Lewin did not recognize, and she found, walking the gantry above her, that she was a little jealous of the yard chief. The yard chief knew this new ship better than she did. The yard chief had built it. Ojo lived in the engine bay for 3 days. He came out only to eat and once to sleep for 4 hours, and then he went back in. The yard crew stopped trying to politely usher him away. They gave him a stool and a clipboard and let him be a small bald god in the corner of the bay, muttering at cable runs. When the new core was lowered into place, the yard chief, without saying anything, gestured Ojo over, and the two of them together ran the final connection. Ojo cried. The yard chief looked away. They did not speak of it. Marisol had moved into the new comm suite the way a small mammal moves into a nest. She had brought blankets. She had brought a thermos. She had taped, somewhere inside the cabinetry, a photograph of a person Lewin had never asked about. The new suite could parse signals the old one could not even hear. The new suite could split a single broadcast into 1,000 component bands and listen to each of them. The new suite was, Marisol said, honest about what it could not do. and Lewin understood that to be the highest compliment Marisol had ever given a piece of hardware. Riggs and Halberd spent a long afternoon in the medical bay arguing about which of the new field tools was the most clever and which was the most stupid. They concluded, with the cheerful viciousness of two people who had been friends for 2 decades, that the same tool was both. Then they fought, briefly and seriously, about whether to install it. They installed it. They were going to argue about it again later. This was their relationship. Tev did not say much about the new helm. Tev tested it once. Tev tested it twice. Tev, on the 3rd test, hummed a tune Lewin had not heard him hum before, something almost cheerful, almost a melody, and the yard chief, who was passing by at that moment, stopped on the gantry, looked down at Tev humming a new tune at his new helm, and nodded once, the way a man nods when he sees a thing he has built being used correctly. Lewin watched all of this from her gantry. She did not interfere. She did not, in fact, do very much at all for those 5 days. She slept. She ate. She walked the corridors of Anchor Yard, which had become a city while she had been gone, and discovered that the city had a small park in the habitat ring with real grass and a bench. She sat on the bench. She watched nothing happen. She wept twice briefly without anyone noticing. She ate a tomato sliced on a plate with salt and thought of Halberd. She did not yet open her mother's letter. She carried it in the inside pocket of her uniform. She let the edge of the envelope wear against the inside of her wrist as she walked. The wear was, in some way she could not articulate, a comfort. On the 5th day, Jonas found her on the bench. He sat down beside her without speaking. He had 2 cups of coffee. He extended one. They drank. "You're going out tomorrow," he said. "Yes." "Into the seam." "Yes." "You always were the one who threaded the needle. When we were kids, the fishing line, remember?" "I remember." "Dad couldn't do it. His hands were too big. Mom couldn't do it. She said her eyes were too old. You did it every time. You were 8. "I remember, Jonas." He drank his coffee. He looked at the small patch of grass. "I'm in the 2nd wave," he said. "If it goes wrong, if you miss the seam, the stubborn is in the 2nd wave. I'll see what's left." "You won't have to." "No, I won't, but if." "If." "Lewin." "Yeah." "I love you." She looked at him. He was looking at the grass. Vance's did not say it. Vance's sat near. Vance's had not, in her memory, said it more than 3 times in her entire life. This was the 4th. "I love you too, Jonas." "Good, glad we sorted that. Drink your coffee." She drank her coffee. The choir arrived on the morning of the 7th day. It came in slow. It came in singing. It came in on every band at once, that long, almost chord, almost sentence, the 3 notes rising and the held breath. It was beautiful. Lewin sat on the bridge of the Magpie with her crew around her and listened to it and felt the same shiver up her spine she had felt 11 days out from Saul, in the cold and the dark and the tired. The choir was by the tactical the size of a small moon. It was matte black and faceted, like a stone someone had been carving for a very long time. It did not have guns that the sensors could see. It did not need them. Around it, in slow, tight formation, were the smaller vessels of the coil, destroyers and corvettes by human terminology. Though they were not those things, they were something else. There were 211 of them. Across the bay, Earth's fleet sat in answering line. There were more of them than there were of the coil, not by a lot, enough. The song came in. Marisol had the volume down to a whisper, but Lewin could feel it in her teeth. "They are hailing us," Marisol said very quietly. "On the open band, they want our voice." "Our voice?" "They want us to sing back. They want us to harmonize, so they know what note we are, so they can fit us into the chord." "Admiral Okonkwo on Fleet Wide," Marisol said suddenly. "Stand by." The bridge speakers crackled. "All ships, this is the Admiral." Okonkwo's voice was low and even. "You know your orders, you know your jobs. We do not return their song. We do not return any single note. On my mark, the fleet will broadcast, each ship, each captain on a frequency assigned. The frequencies are not coordinated, they are not harmonized, they are not consensus. They are us, each of us. They are going to try to find one note in this fleet and tune to it. We are not going to give them one note. We are going to give them 6,000. Sing, captains, sing what you want. Sing whatever you sing, mark. Lewin sat very still in her chair. Around the bridge, the Magpie's crew turned to look at her. She picked up the recorder, she thumbed it on, she did not know why. She held it under her chin, the way she had held it for 1,400 days. Dream report, she said. Day 1498. We are about to do something stupid and brave. I think it might work. I do not know. I am about to sing. I am not a singer. My mother was a singer. She sang while she did the dishes. She sang 3 notes, rising and a held breath. I am going to sing those 3 notes, not because they are special, because they are mine. She thumbed the recorder off. She opened the broadcast. She hummed her mother's 3 notes into the dark. Across the bay, 6,000 other voices opened up. They sang. They sang lullabies and drinking songs and curses and prayers and dirty limericks, and the chorus of pop songs none of them could remember the verses of. They sang in 12 languages. They sang flat. They sang sharp. They sang on key, off key, half key, in keys human music did not have. A pilot in berth 19 sang the alphabet. A gunner in the dorsal of a cruiser whistled. A 19-year-old comms officer on the stubborn Lewin heard, later, sang her grandmother's recipe for stew, the actual words of the recipe, the measurements and the timings in a slow, steady voice, because it was the longest piece of language she knew by heart. On a tender ship at the back of the line, a chaplain who had not believed in anything in particular for 20 years recited, in a low, even voice, the periodic table, because it was the closest thing he had to a creed. On a cruiser called the Long Patience, a gunner sang her infant daughter's name, over and over, on 3 notes that were not the same 3 notes as Lewin's, but which were, in their own way, a held breath. Jonah's Lewin heard sang nothing. Jonas Vance simply held the broadcast key down and at intervals in a low, calm voice said, I am here, I am here, I am here. In the long bay above Mars, an old engineer named Pradeep, who had spent 40 years building drive cores and who had never expected to be in a war, recited, into his broadcast key, the names of every ship he had ever worked on, in order, in a slow, rolling cadence like a litany. There were 143 of them. He got through 90 before the engagement was over. He would later finish the list, alone in his quarters, because he did not believe in leaving a list undone. In the medbay of the Stubborn, a triage nurse named Femi sang a hymn her grandmother had taught her. She did not know what it meant. She knew the words. She sang them. On a destroyer called the Petitioner, the captain, a woman named Marrow, who had lost a hand to the Coil's first scouts a year earlier, and who had been waiting for this, read aloud, into her broadcast key, the list of her grievances. She read them slowly. There were many of them. She read each one as if each one had earned the right to be read. On the comms of a small frigate called the Ada Lovelace, a teenager who should not have been there but who had lied about his age and gotten in because they had needed bodies, sang, in a wavering tenor, a love song he had written for a girl on the habitat ring he had been too afraid to talk to. Her name was Anya. He sang her name in the chorus. He sang it badly. He sang it true. The choir tried to listen. The choir could not listen. It had been listening for 1,000,000 years, and it had never, in all that listening, heard anything that was not, eventually, one note. It had heard 1,000,000 civilizations resolve into one note. It had heard the chord swallow up entire arms of the galaxy, one note at a time. It did not know what to do with this. The smaller vessels around it began to drift out of formation, very slightly. Their sensors could not lock. Their decision trees, harmonic and consensus-bound, stuttered for a sub-second that meant nothing to a human and everything to the Coil. Their formation, which had been perfect, became merely good. On the Magpie's bridge, Lewin watched the tactical. She watched the formation slip. She watched the seams in the choir's hull, the seams she had logged 8 months ago without knowing what she was logging. "Tav," she said. "Cap, take us in." "Yes, Cap." The Magpie lit her new drive. The new drive was a beautiful thing. It made the old one feel like a piece of folk art. The ship leapt, not the gentle accumulation of years on the rim, but a sudden, eager animal lunge. And Lewin felt herself pressed into her chair and laughed, out loud, because the ship was a different ship and it was hers. "Forward batteries, dorsal lance," she said. "Stand by, we are not opening fire, we are threading a needle." "Aye, Cap." The Magpie ran the gauntlet. The smaller coil vessels, destroyer equivalents by mass, were turning to engage. They were turning too slowly. Their decision trees were still stuttering, still trying to find the one note, still trying to harmonize with 6,000 humans singing 6,000 things. The Magpie threaded between them. She took a glancing hit on the dorsal. Lewin felt it in her teeth, and Tev did not flinch, did not even look at the damaged board. Tev was humming his tuneless tune. Tev was very good. To port, a coil destroyer slid across the Magpie's path. Tev rolled the ship under it without seeming to think about it. The destroyer's flank turned in the viewport, close enough that Lewin could see the faceting on its hull, the same faceting as the choir, smaller, repeated, fractal. The destroyer fired. The shot went where the Magpie had been a half-second earlier. Tev was already past. Tev was humming. To starboard, 2 more destroyers were converging. They were trying, Lewin realized, to box the Magpie, a tactic that required perfect coordination, perfect harmony between the 2 captains. They almost had it. They almost had it the way a singer almost has a note that is a quarter step off. The 2 destroyers arrived at the box position a half-second apart. The half-second was the Magpie's. Tev slid through the closing gap with maybe 10 meters of clearance on either side, and Lewin, watching the gap close behind them on the rear sensors, laughed out loud for the second time in 7 days. "Cap," Marisol's voice. "I have the seam, bearing 039er, 2 minutes. Take us to it." "Aye." Behind them, somewhere in the long line of Earth's fleet, a cruiser opened up with its main batteries. Lewin could not see it on the Magpie's tactical without turning her head, and she did not turn her head, but she heard the wash of it on the comms, the broad, flat note of a long-range gun finding its target, and then a young gunner's voice on the open band, female comm, saying very precisely, "That's 1." And then again, a moment later, "That's 2." The gunner was counting destroyers. The gunner was, Lewin realized, also singing. She was making her count into a song, a slow, steady song of 2 notes, 1 for each kill, and somewhere in the chord that the coil could not parse, the gunner's 2-note song was, in its own small way, helping. The choir loomed. It was no longer a small moon on the tactical, it was a small moon in the viewport. Its faceted hull turned slow as a planet. The seams between its panels were thin black lines, almost invisible. Lewin could see them because she had logged them. She had drawn them by hand in her sensor reports 8 months ago, in the cold and the dark and the tired, because that was the kind of captain she was. "Ojo," she said, "reactor." "Standing by, Cap." Ojo's voice was steady. He had been the one to seal the breach. He had been the one to wire the new drive into the old spine. He had been the one to bury the unknown life form in the airlock with a small ceremony. He was a very serious man, and he was, at this moment, smiling. "On my mark," Lewin said. "Vent the core full purge into the seam." "On your mark, Cap." The Magpie ran for the seam. Lewin's hand was on the recorder. Her finger was on the photograph of her mother, taped to the corner of the navigation console. She was, without realizing it, humming, 3 notes rising, a held breath. "Cap," Tev said, 10 seconds. "Ojo." "Standing." 5. "Standing." "Mark." The Magpie's reactor vented. The new core, The beautiful matte black core with the red circle and line stenciled on it opened up, and through its heart through the seam in the choir's hull, a long bright thread of plasma like a stitch being pulled. The choir cracked. It did not explode. It cracked. It cracked along the seam Lewin had logged, and it cracked along the next seam and the next, the cracks running through it like a stone splitting in winter. From the cracks came light. From the light came the song, but the song was different now. It was breaking. It was no longer a chord. It was thousands of voices that had been one voice for 1,000,000 years suddenly remembering they were thousands. The choir's hull pulled itself apart slowly, with a strange, terrible dignity, and the smaller coil vessels, their decision tree shattered, their harmonic gone, began to retreat. They did not flee. They did not have the concept. They simply, in a slow, ragged way, turned around. They began the long journey back. Their formation, which had been perfect, became merely human. The magpie limped clear of the wreck. Her new drive was dying. Her dorsal lance was a melted stub. Her reactor was a cold hollow. She was bleeding atmosphere from 3 places, and Halberd was already at the emergency lockers, and Ojo was already cursing in the manner of a man who knew exactly which curses, in what order would best address each specific failure. Behind them, the choir continued to come apart. It did so slowly, almost peacefully, the way an iceberg comes apart in warm water. The light from inside it dimmed, brightened, dimmed again. The smaller vessels around it pulled away in long, ragged lines. Lewin sat in her chair. Her hand was on the photograph. She was still humming. Cap Marisol said, "Anchor Yard is hailing." "Put them on." The speakers crackled. Magpie Okonkwo said, "This is Anchor Yard, come home, coffee is on." Lewin put her head back against the seat. She breathed. "Dream report," she said into the recorder very quietly. "Day 1498 addendum. We sang. They could not listen. We are coming home. I would like a shower. I would like a bed. I would like to give my mother's letter the respect it deserves. I would like very much to sleep without dreaming for one night. Just one. I think I have earned it." She thumbed the recorder off. The magpie came home on a tow. The yard chief was there to meet her. He had a clipboard and an expression that was, by his standards, riotous, a sort of slow widening of one eye. He nodded at Lewin as she came down the umbilical. She nodded back. "Captain, Chief, she'll need a refit." "Yes." "Worse than last time." "Yes." "That coupling you complained about." "It held." "It did." "Good ship," the chief said. "Good ship," Lewin agreed. Okonkwo was further down the corridor. She had 2 cups of coffee. She held them the way she had held them the first time, without ceremony, just with care. She extended one to Lewin. "Vance, Admiral, you sang." "I sang." "What was it?" Lewin took the cup. The coffee was very hot. The corridor smelled faintly of rain. "My mother's tune," she said. 3 notes, rising, a held breath. Okonkwo nodded slowly. "Mine was the national anthem," she said. "But badly, I cannot sing. I sang it badly on purpose. I thought it would help." "I think it did." "I think it did too." They drank their coffee. Behind Lewin, the magpie creaked and ticked and began the slow business of cooling. "Vance," the admiral said. "Ma'am." "They will come back." "I know." "Not for a long time. We hurt them. We hurt them in a way they have not been hurt before. They will go away and they will think and they will come back. It will take years." "Yes." "You will have leave," Okonkwo said. "Long leave. As long as you want, 6 months, a year, 2. We will not call you back until you call us. When you call us, the magpie will be ready. She is going to take a while to put back together. We will take our time. We will do it right." "Thank you, ma'am." "Vance." "Ma'am." "Welcome home." Lewin drank her coffee. She looked at the corridor, at the working people in the gray uniform with the red circle and line on their shoulder, At the slow, far turning of the foundry arm through the viewport at the corridor's end, at the place where, somewhere on the far side of the station, a kitchen was making bread. "Yeah," she said. "Yeah, I'm home." Dream Report Day 1. Captain Lewin Vance held the recorder under her chin in a small, bright kitchen on the surface of Earth. The window was open. It was raining. The rain smelled like the rain she had been remembering for 4 years and 11 months, and she discovered with a calm, small surprise that her memory had been accurate in every particular. She had a cup of coffee. It was not as good as the Admiral's. It was hers. On the table beside her was her mother's letter. She had not yet opened it. She would open it. She would open it tonight or tomorrow or the day after that. She would open it when she was ready. Her mother, she suspected, would not mind. She thumbed the recorder. Dream Report Day 1. I slept. I did not dream. I woke up and there was rain. I drank coffee. I am going to open a letter from my mother in a little while. I am going to sit in this kitchen until I get bored. I do not think I will get bored. Marisol is coming over later. Tev is bringing his dog. Halbert is bringing too much food as usual. Ojo is fixing the neighbor's water heater because he cannot stop. Jonas is bringing himself, which is sufficient. The choir is gone. The choir is not gone forever. The choir will come back, and when they do, we will sing again. I do not know what I will sing next time. I think I will figure it out. We have time. She paused. She looked out the window at the rain. She hummed very quietly 3 notes, rising and a held breath. She thumbed the recorder off. She sat for a long time after that. The kitchen was very quiet. The rain went on. After a while she picked up the envelope. She held it in both hands. She turned it over. Her mother's handwriting was on the front, her own name, in the long, thin letters she had not seen since she was 19. She opened it. She read it. It was not a long letter. It was 3 small pages in her mother's hand. It did not say goodbye because her mother had not known she was saying goodbye. It had been written by the date at the top, 2 months before her mother died, on a morning Lewin would never know about. It said small things. It said the neighbor's cat had had kittens. It said the rosemary by the back step had gotten leggy. It said her mother had been thinking about the time Lewin, at 6, had been afraid of the dark, and her mother had given her a small flashlight, and Lewin had taken it everywhere for a year, and had finally stopped using it on a particular Tuesday for no reason her mother had ever been able to determine. And her mother had loved her very much then, and had been loving her very much ever since. It said her mother hoped Lewin had not, on the rim in the dark, needed a flashlight, and that if she had, she hoped Lewin had found one, and that if she had not, her mother was sorry she could not, from this far, hand her one. It said, "Come home when you can. There will be coffee." It was signed, Mom. Lewin folded the letter. She put it on the table beside the recorder. She put her hand on it flat. She did not weep. The weeping had already happened in the shower, on the bench, in the receiving bay, in her brother's arms, in the seat of her chair, on the bridge of the Magpie, in the dark of her cabin on the rim. The weeping was already done. What she felt now was something else, a low, warm, steady thing in her chest, like a kept fire. She made another cup of coffee. She drank it. She hummed her mother's 3 notes, rising and the held breath. She thought she could hear them, very faintly in the rain. Outside somewhere, a child was laughing. The rain came down on the roof in a long, slow, patient sound. The kitchen smelled of coffee and bread and the wet green of the world. The Magpie, in dry dock far above, ticked and settled and was, for the first time in 1400 days, at rest. So was her captain. She closed her eyes. She did not dream. It was, by every measure she had, enough.